Yes, go live.
Hello, Rabbi.
Good
Tov.
afternoon. Good
Dave,
afternoon.
Mark.
Good Chodesh.
Chodesh Tov, כן.
Happy New Month.
And Mark, Mazel Tov for the bar mitzvah.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
Bar mitzvah? Who's bar mitzvah?
It was my son, Michael Gabronsky.
Hello. Who had a bar mitzvah?
Son, Michael Gabronsky.
Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov. Where was it?
Osamayach.
Or Sameach Glen Hazel or Cape Town?
Sea Point. Osamayach Sea Point.
Okay. Mazel Tov.
Thank you.
Let's try.
Mazel tov.
Let's try and get the screen share to work. I don't know why it's always difficult. Try again. There we go. Okay. Right. So it's after 1, and we have
Thank you.
not a minion, but a mezuman. Right, so you learned a bit about inheritance already. This is chapter 3 today. I must tell you, when my parents passed away, their will said that all 4 children should be equal inheritors. I'm the firstborn. So I was a little bit farible that I didn't get my double portion. I could have used a few more dollars, but I didn't say a word. I wasn't going to upset the peace in the family over money. I've seen too many families fall apart because of financial disputes in the family. So
Yeah.
I took a deep breath and swallowed hard and carried on. I've been speaking to a dayan on the Beth Din here over the last year or so about this because I'm busy. I must be honest, I haven't written my own will. And the reason is because I want to make sure it's halachically correct. And the laws of Torah and inheritance are not the same as South Africa. So I'm busy with a dayan and a lawyer trying to work it out that it should be both halachically correct and legally correct. And the dayan taught me some things about inheritance that I did not know, that apparently many people just give an extra portion to the firstborn, not the full extra portion that the Torah speaks about. So the Torah, so let's say you have 4 children. So the way the Torah, the simple Torah explanation would be that it will be divided into 5 shares instead of 4 shares. And the firstborn would get 2 of those 5 shares. So he wouldn't get a double portion in the sense of getting 50%, he would get 40%. So instead of 25% as one of 4 children, if you divide it into 5 instead of 4, and he gets 2 portions, which is the way the Torah envisaged it, so it would amount to 40% to the firstborn, as opposed to 25% if there were 4 children. But he tells me that today many people, rabbis, etc., don't give that full extra 15% to the firstborn. They just take a chunk of something and give him an extra portion than he would have gotten otherwise, but not another full portion of the estate. So interesting. I can't say I'm an expert on the subject yet, but I'm learning. So here we have some things also that are interesting. Number one, a firstborn does not receive a double portion of property that will later accrue to his father's estate, only of that property that was in his father's possession and had already entered his domain at the time of his death. Torah says, "B'chola sheyimotze loy," of everything that he possesses, meaning he has to possess it at the time of his death in order for the firstborn to get a double portion of that. If the father, it only came into the father's possession after he died, then it will not apply. So he explains, if one of the people whose estate the father would inherit dies after he did, maybe the father died and then his father was living 100 till 100, and the father died after the son, or the grandfather died after the father. So the father who died, who predeceased his father, inherits from his father, but it's only after he died. So that part doesn't go. The firstborn of the grandson, the firstborn grandson would not get a double portion, but all of his children would get equally. Similarly, if the father was owed a debt, or he owned the ship at sea, and it's not around, all sons share the inheritance equally. So it's only what's there, what has come into the father's possession and was in his father's possession at the time of his death. If one of the colleagues of a person's father slaughtered an animal and then the father died, the son is entitled to a double portion of the presents from that animal. So I'll be honest, I was looking for my Chayenu, which has notes. I couldn't find it. I'm not sure 100% what this is talking about, to be perfectly honest. I'm speculating. So possibly it means as follows, that in those days there would be like social norms and social obligations. Lahavdil, by our African brothers, when they have a simcha or they have a funeral, by them a funeral is like a simcha, it seems to me. They shecht cows. And for weddings, they have labolas with cows. And they have an obligation, there's sort of a social obligation to shecht the cow and to share it with the whole village. The little bit I know of African culture. So it could be that similarly in the olden days in Jewish culture, a person would slaughter an animal and then distribute to his friends. And if the father was the friend, and he would normally be getting a chunk of that animal, so the son, the firstborn son, would be entitled to a double portion of the presents from that animal. I'm just speculating that that's what it might mean. I'm not 100% sure. Sorry.
Rabbi, before we go on, did I miss halacha number 2? Because I don't think I saw it.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. Thank you. I skipped it inadvertently. Thank you for bringing that to my attention, Dave. Number 2, let's go back. If the father left his sons a cow that was rented out, hired out, or that was pasturing in open territory and it gave birth when? After the father died. So that is new property or new value coming into the father's estate, but it came in after he died. The firstborn receives a double share of it and its offspring, even though it came in after he died, presumably because it was there before he died. Where was it? Inside the mother. It just hadn't been born yet. So it's not as if it just arrived out of the blue when the mother gave birth. It was there previously. Number 4, the firstborn does not receive a double portion of an increase to the value of the estate that accrued after his father's death. Instead, he should have the value of that increase assessed, and he should give the financial equivalent of the difference to the ordinary son. So if he got a double portion, he should give it back. The above applies provided the property undergoes a change. For example, budding grain has matured and become ears. Budding dates became fully ripened dates. If, however, the value of the land improved as a matter of course without undergoing a change, meaning the price of land went up, or he says a small tree grew taller and thicker, or sediment was washed up on the land, the firstborn receives a double portion of the increase in value. So he will not get an increase if it went up in value. The example he gave was the budding grains. He will get the increase if the land improved without undergoing any change. If the property increased in value because of investment, he does not receive a double portion. So what does that mean? That means what does it mean because of investment? I mean, it doesn't mean, I would have thought he meant that if the land value went up, the price of property went up. You know, property goes up and property comes down. If the property went up after the father died, but before they distributed the inheritance, then it's a good question. So he said because of investment. Maybe that's what he means, that the price of property went up. So basically, he gets a double portion of that which was in the father's estate at the time of death. And if things go up in value afterwards, it depends. The firstborn does not receive a double share of a debt owed to his father. So a guy owed him money, then he died, then he paid back the debt. Oh, so is this new money? No, it's not new money, it's old money. So it shouldn't apply. It was there, part of the estate before. This applies even though the debt was supported by a promissory note and land was expropriated to pay the debt. So basically the money belonged to the father before he died. The fact that the guy paid it only afterwards, maybe it was only due to be paid afterwards. The father was owed a debt by the first. This is interesting. This firstborn who's claiming double portions of his father's estate, he himself borrowed money from his father while the father was alive. Maybe he wanted to buy a house and the father lent the money to buy a house, whatever it was. So he owes his father money. Now he owes the estate money. The father's died. So he's getting a double portion. Now new money is coming in after the father died. Which new money? The debt that this firstborn is paying to the estate. So there's an argument to say if it's new money, he should or should not get a double portion. So if the father was owed a debt by the firstborn son himself, there's a shaila. There's a machlekes and there's an unresolved doubt. Some say that he should receive a double portion because the money was in his possession. So it's not new money, it was there before. It could, however, be argued that he should not receive the extra amount since he is inheriting it because of his father. It did not enter his father's possession before his death. He's only paying it back after he died. And therefore the ruling is, make a compromise. He should take half of the firstborn's portion from it. Instead of getting a full double portion, he'll get half a double portion. So he'll have to pay a little bit less than the original debt. 6, when a firstborn sells his extra share of the inheritance before the estate is about, okay, the guy has a cash flow problem. He needs cash now. So before they do the, inheritance take time with the lawyers and mices. Even in the olden days, it took time. You have to somehow work out. I mean, sometimes you have to maybe sell the land to get the cash to divide, whatever. So it takes time. You don't just get it the next day after Shiva. So, and if the firstborn needs money, so he could sell his extra share of the inheritance to someone. The guy will give him an advance of the money, so he gets the money up front, which he needs money now. So if he sells his extra share of the inheritance before the estate is divided, the sale is binding. He's allowed to do that. For the firstborn's extra share is distinct even before the estate is divided. So it would seem that his basic inheritance, he cannot sell. But the double portion, the extra part, he could sell. Therefore, if initially the firstborn divides a portion of the estate, either landed property or movable property, and accepts the same portion as an ordinary son, he is considered to have waived his right to an extra portion with regard to the entire estate and will receive only an ordinary son's share of the remainder. You hear? This is very important. If the firstborn divides a portion of the estate and accepts the same as everybody, that is tantamount to him waiving his rights to the double portion on the whole estate. When does this apply? If he did not protest. If, however, he protested against his brothers and said in the presence of two witnesses, although I'm dividing these grapes, for example, or whatever it was, equally with my brothers, this does not mean, do not interpret this that I'm waiving my rights to the firstborn share. I'm making a clear statement and declaration that I am not waiving those rights. It's just with regard to this little piece or these grapes or this piece of land, whatever, that I'm taking an equal share. And his protest is significant, and he is not considered to have waived his right to the other parts of the estate. Even if he protested with regard to the division of grapes while they were still attached to the earth, and yet agreed to divide them equally after the harvest, he's not considered to have waived his right to the other property in the estate. If, however, the grapes were pressed and he divided the wine equally with his brothers and did not issue any protest when the wine was made, he took an equal portion to them, then he is considered to have waived his rights to the extra portion in the other parts of the estate. To what can the matter be compared? To a person who issued a protest when grapes were divided, but then divided olives equally, in which instance he is considered to have waived his rights to an extra portion of the entire estate by virtue of the fact that when it came to the olives, he took the same as his brothers. So if he doesn't want that to happen, then he has to issue an official declaration of protest that he's taking, in this little case over here, maybe he needs it quickly, he doesn't have time to fight with them, he'll take the equal amount, but he's not waiving his rights for the rest of the estate. Now comes an interesting question. You all know by now what yibum means. Yibum and chalitza, right? When a man dies childless and he leaves at least one brother alive, married or single, makes no difference, because in biblical law, polygamy was permissible. It was considered a code of honor and a debt of honor by one of the surviving brothers to marry their late brother's widow, who was childless, to rebuild their late brother's family, hopefully to have children with his widow, and the firstborn can be named after his late brother. That's considered a debt of honor. Today, we don't do yibum. We don't allow him to marry her, because normally you may not marry a sister-in-law. In the olden days, we allowed it. Yibum was an exception because we assumed people were doing it for the mitzvah. But today, we're worried that people might not be doing it for the mitzvah, They might be doing it because this particular young widow happens to be a drop-dead gorgeous blonde. Or maybe she has a lot of money. So he's marrying her for the wrong reasons. So then there's a shaila if it's kosher, because you're not supposed to marry your sister-in-law normally. So today we don't do yibum. We do, however, perform chalitza. I have been present at 2 chalitza ceremonies at the Johannesburg Besdin over the years. One, I was just a fly on the wall. I asked him to tell me because I'd like to see it. The other one was actually a young woman who was from my shul. And her young husband just dropped dead one day out of the blue. And he had a brother. And the brother had to do chalitza with her so that she could then be free to, 30 days later, she's free to marry, 90 days later, she's free to marry a stranger. 30 days, 90 days later. So without chalitza, she's stuck to the family. So chalitza frees her and she can then marry anyone she likes. But by rabbinic law, she may not marry a kohen. Now, 7. The brother who performs the rite of yibum, marrying his brother's childless widow, inherits all of the property in the late brother's estate at the time of the brother's death. With regard to any property that is fit to enter the deceased estate afterwards, he'll receive the same share as the others. So there are two sets of heirs to this brother who died childless, leaving a widow. The widow is an heir, and his brothers are heirs also. So normally they would divide it. But if one of the brothers is going to do yibum and marry the widow, then he becomes the heir of everything that's in the estate at the time of the death. Things that come in afterwards will divide with his brothers. He derives this from the fact that the verse uses the term bechor, firstborn, and the firstborn that she will bear will take the place of the brother who died, and thus his name will not be wiped out among Israel. So I'm not 100% sure, to be honest, what this means. Again, I speculate that it might mean that just as we see that please God, she has a son, and she'll name him for her late husband, he will be the firstborn, and he will take the place of the brother who died. So from this, the Rambam is deriving that thing. I'm not 100% sure, to be honest. I don't see how this word dealing with a future son that will be born impacts on the current husband who's marrying the widow. I'm sorry. If anybody has any ideas, please feel free to share. Okay. Just as the brother who performs the rite of yibum does not acquire property that is fit to be acquired by the estate, in contrast to property that is already within the estate, so too he does not acquire the increase in the estate's value. If after the death of the brother, the estate goes up in value, that too will be divided equally with the other brothers, and he will not be the sole heir to that. He explains, it refers to the increase in the deceased brother's share in his father's estate. So let's say the father died, now their father died. So these brothers have a share in the father's estate. If the value of the estate increased in the time between the father's death and the division of that estate among the brothers, then this guy who marries the widow does not have any extra share in that. It's divided equally with all the brothers. Even if the property increased in value after he married his brother's widow, but before it was divided, he still receives the same share of the increase as the other brothers. This applies despite the fact that he receives two shares of this property, his own share and the share of his brother, whose widow he married. He's getting his own share and he's getting his late brother's share. Well, the father died while they were all alive. So the father died before the son, i.e. the brother who died childless, died. And therefore, it is divided equally. We already explained in Hilchos Shchenim, the laws of neighbors. You remember, maybe you remember, that the firstborn gets two portions of the land of the deceased father. It's only reasonable and right that we should give him the land contiguous, that it should be next to the other portion of land, which is then easier to plow and harvest instead of going here and then got a kilometer down to another field. So, like we have the laws of bar metzra. Do you remember bar metzra, that a neighbor has a right to purchase a field before a stranger because his field is next door? So it's just being reasonable. So we already explained in those laws that the firstborn is given his two portions of a field together. They should be contiguous. This does not apply, however, with regard to a person who marries his brother's childless widow. He does yibum. He receives his portion and his brother's portion by lot. If it happens that he's allotted proportions in two different places, then so be it. It's not the same as getting his own double portion, where there we would make a point of giving them together. Here he's getting his brother's portion plus his portion, and they draw it by lots, and it works out that his gets a different one, which is not contiguous to his own, then that's the way it's going to be, unfortunately. Finally, number 9, the following laws apply when a childless widow who was waiting to be married by her deceased husband's brother dies. Ay, 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 what a tragedy. First, she loses her husband. Then she dies. And she's been waiting for one of her brothers-in-law to marry him. Before Yibum was done, she dies. Maybe she died of a broken heart. I don't know. Nebuch. Sad story. So the childless widow who was waiting to be married by her deceased brother dies. What's the halacha now? They apply even when one of the brothers designated her for marriage. They'd already agreed that the eldest brother, for example, who says we should start with the eldest and work our way down. Let's say the eldest brother agreed he's going to do yibum and marry her, and then she died. The following laws of inheritance will apply. Her family from her father's household inherit her, but her late husband's brothers also have a share in this inheritance from her brother, from her husband. Her late husband's brothers also have a share in what was her late husband's. So it's divided as follows. Her family from her father's household inherit her nichsei milog. Who remembers what nichsei milog means? You can unmute yourself and volunteer if you think you know.
No. No, I don't remember.
So when a man marries a woman and she comes into the marriage with property, then her land belongs to her. It's called nichsei tzoyin basel. It's strong like iron. But there's nichsei milog, other things The nichse milog, if I'm not mistaken, will be the fruits, the crops that come out of her fields. Let's say she has a farm. The farm that she comes into the marriage with, a farm that she inherited from her father, say, that farm remains her property. So after death, that remains hers. It does not go to her husband's heirs. When they get married, how do they divide between the husband and wife? The anti-nuptial contract, so to speak, in Talmudic times, is that her property, her fixed land would remain hers, but the derivatives of the property, the fruits, the crops that came from that property is called nichse milog, and that would go to the husband. Why? Because the husband, when he marries her, signs a ksuba that he's going to support her. And halachically, he has to support her even with the shirt off his back. And halachically, if she gets taken captive by Cossacks or something, God forbid, he is obligated to redeem her, to pay a ransom, to get her free, even with the shirt on his back. So therefore, in recognition of his total commitment, total financial commitment he makes to his wife in the ksuba, he has certain benefits. For example, if she finds something in the street, it belongs to him. I'm sure she's not happy about that, but that's the law, because he's looking after her completely. So likewise here, she would keep the land, he would get the crops from that land. So now that their brother died and he had property, and now his wife dies, so her family from her father's household inherit her nichse milog and half of her nichse tzon bazel. So they get the crops and half of the property. Her husband's heirs inherit the money due her by virtue of her ksuba, the 200 zuz or whatever it was, which is a chunk of money, and the other half of the property. That's how the division is done between these two different families that are both heirs to the same estates. Since they inherit, since they inherit the money due her by virtue of her ksuba, her husband's heirs are obligated to bury her, which costs money. Chevra Kadisha has fees and charges, and tombstone, etc., as we've explained elsewhere. So if they inherit the ksuba, they're obligated to pay for her funeral and burial costs.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
Rabbi, may I ask the actual meaning of the words nichse tzon bazel?
Literally, it means sheep of stone, of iron. But it means something that is ironclad.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Let's do a quick quiz. Does the firstborn receive a greater share than his brothers when the debt that was owed to their father gets paid after the father's death? It was right in the beginning. The answer is no. Look it up. The first halacha does not receive the portion of things that accrue later on.
Yeah. That's right.
Right? Two, does the firstborn receive a greater share than his brothers when an item that their father had rented out was returned?
Yes.
Also in the beginning.
Yes.
Yes is correct. Where was that? Which halacha? That was halacha number 2. Yeah. Why? Because it was there before the father died.
Yeah.
3. Remember this case? The firstborn himself took a loan from his father. Does he get a greater share than his brothers in a debt that he personally owed his father? Double portion, no portion, or portion and a half?
Portion and a half.
Very good. We said there was a machloikis, and therefore they came to a compromise, we'll get half. Finally, if a childless widow dies, do the husband's heirs receive anything from her inheritance? We just discussed that now. A, B, or C?
I think it is B, but I'm
B.
not sure.
Yes. I think B.
Well
Yeah.
done. Well done. Well done. Okay, we just had that now, so I'm not going to go back. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And
Thank you.
I must apologize before you go, just to give you notice that I'm traveling again. So I'm off on Wednesday night to the United States. I'm giving talks in Florida and in Panama. And I'll be back on the 15th of February, please God. So I'm away 3 weeks. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Please
Travel safe.
Please make another plan with my dear deceased cousin, Rabbi Joshua Gordon, who gives great shiurim online.